Yes.
Okay. All right.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Oh, baby.
Hi.
Oh, that's
I'm on
cute.
mat leave. So this is Parker.
Hi, Parker. How old is Parker?
He is 3.5.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, I miss my babies being that small. But we're not having another one.
Oh,
Oh, so cute.
let's see how good he is on this.
Really good. He's really good. Very calm.
He's just woken up from his nap.
Oh, nice. That's great. Okay. Hi, ladies.
yeah. Hi, ladies. Please feel free to also, introduce yourself in the chat room. Where do you work? Where do you come from? What are some of the challenges you're going through so we can help each other?
Yep. Let's see. Okay, I think I forgot to introduce myself last time before we started. So I think Rachel did remind me. And so I want to kick off just quickly introducing myself, and Lingling should too.
Yeah.
This is our 4th virtual coffee chat, actually, and we've been doing them every 2 weeks. And so sometimes I forget how much like I feel just comfortable with the community, and how much like maybe sometimes it's like for like first timers. So I'm Yardley. Thank you for joining today. I'm the co-founder and board member for Women in Product. This was an idea that started in May 2016 over dinner with a few other women. And when we discussed our career path, we just realized, when I started in product in 2007, there just weren't a lot of women in the function. And I just struggled to really understand what success looked like. And I found that every company and every industry expected different things from product management. And so we decided to throw a conference 4 months later. We had Facebook sponsored a small conference in September 2016 that allowed for about 300 people, but we have 4,000 women signed up within a week of us opening up registration. So we knew that there was demand there. And so we decided to formally form the 501c3 nonprofit organization in January 2017. And now today we have 19,000 members worldwide, 35 local chapters. Typically we have an annual conference in the fall, and our last one in November, we had 2,000 women at Hilton Union Square. And, we're gearing up for this fall. During this time, we're going to be having a virtual conference. So please stay tuned for more details about that. I've had about 20 years of working experience, but I've worked as an engineer, as a product manager, as well as a general manager in a variety of different companies, very big companies like Apple, eBay, Yahoo, way back. But then I had a 6-year stint at a startup called Trulia. It was started to bring transparency of real estate information to consumers way back in like 2010. Was within the first 100 employees, and we went public, grew to 1,300 people in 2.5 years. Then we were acquired by our biggest competitor, Zillow, and grew, and I became a general manager for rentals business there, and grew that business almost from nothing to $10 million in 2.5 years. And so that was a very wild ride, from startup to IPO to acquiring companies and then getting acquired. So I can talk a lot about that experience. And then I also worked as the chief product officer for Arianna Huffington about well-being. Especially during this time, I think we all need to really focus on self-care, taking micro steps and making sure that we're staying healthy, both physically and mentally. And now I'm doing angel investing on companies, advising, consulting various different startups, mostly typically from Series B on. And I'm also on the board, as I mentioned. So hopefully this gives you a very broad background on my experience. And of course, we want to open up for questions. So I want to go a lot more detailed as to my background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yardley, for the introduction of your background. Hi everyone. My name is Lingling Chen. I am a product marketer in the Bay Area. I'm currently in a consumer health tech company called Uniform Teeth. So it's a venture-backed company that helps people smile better with clear aligners. I'm a really long-time member of this community, actually since 2017. Thank you so much for joining this virtual hangout. I see a lot of familiar names here, so thank you so much for coming back again and again. So today we wanted to specifically talk about career progression, and also since Mother's Day is coming up very soon, and then there are many moms in this community, we also want to just chat a little bit about personal growth after being a mom. And I do read all of your questions during the event, in the Eventbrite sign-up form. So thank you also so much for giving us the thoughts and then also ideas. So let's kick it off. Are you ready, Yardley?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I do wanted to talk a little bit about your family, because you mentioned in our first fireside chat or virtual hangouts that you are originally come from Hong Kong. So how is your upbringing impacting how you see your career progression? And then what is the biggest influence that your mom or your dad has on your career choices?
Yeah, I think this is very timely because I actually really miss my dad right now. My dad is in Shanghai at the moment. And I've thought a lot about my career progression throughout the years. And, we grew up in a pretty poor family. My father was a son of immigrants from Ningbo to Hong Kong, and there were 13 brothers and sisters. He actually dropped out of high school to start his own business. And he started this business where, it's about manufacturing wall power sockets, extension cords. He started it from nothing. And the business still stands today. It's a very successful business now, and he has thousands of employees in a manufacturing plant outside of Shanghai called Ningbo, where he originally grew up, and then import and export in Hong Kong. And I'm a family of 5. I have 4 brothers and sisters on my dad's side, we are very much spread out all over the world right now. My mom lives with us, so I have a lot of help there. But my dad has been in Ningbo, as I mentioned. My sisters are actually in Toronto. I also have another sister in New York. And so I think during this time, I think a lot about my family. I miss them a lot. We typically make a lot of trips to see each other. And how it relates to my career, for me, I think family always comes first. And ever since we were young, my dad taught us a lot around being independent and also a lot about rejections. And then the third thing is about having grit. So, he really believed that no matter what we're doing, we need to be humble, first of all, but then he at a very young age shares stories with me about when he started his business. He was 18 and he traveled to Africa as the first sales, and he knew nothing really about the country or if he was really going to land any deals. And then he traveled to London and ultimately was able to score a deal there. And he just kept telling me how many no's and rejections he got along the way. People thinking his business idea was really crazy. and just being able to be resilient and just always being like, really being able to handle rejections well, because rejections is a form of feedback. And people are going to always tell you no, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. And so I think with that I've applied to those principles to my career throughout my lifetime. I think as an Asian female, like working in electrical engineering when I first started my career, all the way to like where I'm now, a lot of times there are a lot of rejections, there are a lot of biases, there are a lot of no's. But every time I get negative feedback, I actually see it as a gift. I know it's really hard to hear people say no and or like be discouraging on how hard I'm working towards something, but it's really I think if I'm able to reframe my mind and handle those no's and like understand why, first of all, and then what the perception is, I'm able to then either one, change it if I really want to change it, or two, just take it as like, all right, this is good knowledge, but I'm going to like turn it into my like into my strength, and being able to handle that like at the beginning of a conversation if I'm interviewing or something like that. So a good example would be, I think a lot of times when people first meet me, because I have some sort of Valley Girl accent, and I've talked about this before, the way I talk, I think it's like it's a big hindrance a lot of times. People think that I may not be as smart, and or I'm asking questions instead of saying statements. But over time, I've learned to use that to my advantage, and really being able to use my personality, the way I speak, maybe the warmth that I generate, to like my advantage for people that really understand that I'm someone that could be trusted and that they're able to open up to me. So in my initial conversations, when I meet people, I typically listen to them more than I do the talking. And then I'm able to use my warmth, the way I speak, to gain the trust. And then when I do speak back, I'm able to really demonstrate what I've heard and my intelligence, when I give back advice. And I think that actually has worked to my advantage over time. And in terms of grit, I just don't take no for an answer very easily. I don't really care if people like reject me. I don't really care if people try to turn me down. I'm just like coming back harder and harder every time. Of course, I don't want to like pest people if like they're really saying no to like my ideas, but I don't care. I'm just going to keep coming back. I'm going to tell you why I think that's just the right thing to do. I'm going to like overcome like whatever rejections with like something that's like stronger, with data, with more evidence, with my belief. And I just try not to like let that get to me. And I do think that those principles that my dad instilled in me early on is still something that I really care about from a career growth perspective. And look, I know I've heard from many of you where you're not getting ideas like bought, or like your manager isn't supporting you, and or why you're not getting that promotion. I get it. Like but if you're ever stuck in a situation where the blockers are becoming so huge that like you can no longer really continue with your grit, then I do suggest like moving on to some other place or finding another place that will accept you. I wrote an article long time ago, I forgot how many years ago, about how I actually view like career progression. I actually view it as like going to a candy store. How many of you actually remember Sweet Factory, or is it still around? Or am I outdating myself? Anyone? No. All right. So I grew up in this candy store called Sweet Factory in Sacramento. You literally go in, you see all these candies, and all you have to do is take up a bag, and you kind of like go get your own candies, and then you wait at the end and you check out. And like I those were one of my favorite places of all times when I was a kid, and I view my career like that. So like when I go into candy store, it's like overwhelming. Like there's so many things I want to learn. There's so many things I want to do, similar to going to a job. like there's so many things that you could do and learn, and it's easy to get distracted, but you have to really think, what are the skill set / candies that you really want to pick up? Because ultimately you can't eat so much candies where your stomach gets like really full and or like spend so much money by the time you leave. So just be really focused about like, what are the skill sets I want to learn? How am I going to learn those things? And then as long as I'm continuing to learn here, I will stay here and I will like enjoy like the skill sets I'm learning, the people I'm working with, candies I'm eating. But as soon as I feel like I'm done, like there's no way I can learn more here, or I'm just being really blocked and my career progression is not going to happen, then it's fine. You like pick up your cart, you pick up your basket, your bag, whatever, you check out and you leave. And whatever skill sets that you picked up is transferable. It may not always seem like that, especially those that are like trying to switch different functions and or like into different industries. It may not always seem like that in the beginning, but trust me, like whatever you've learned, they are transferable skills. It's just about how you package it, how do you talk about it into your next job. And so I do think that oftentimes that analogy is always still in my head. And hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Yardley, for sharing, your experience about your upbringing and your father's story. So as our career progresses and as we grow from individual contributors to people managers, our skill sets also need to evolve. So can you share with us how you grew different skill sets or at different stages at your career?
Yeah, I think especially in product management, when you become a people manager, I think it's really, really hard to let go of like the individual contributor responsibilities where you just want to do everything. You've been the one that's like doing the requirements, working with engineers, working with designs, like shipping the product, being very hands-on. And that first step of understanding how you can still be a strong people leader but not doing the actual work, it's often really hard for people. And then it comes into a form of like micromanagement, or you go into the other extreme. It's like, oh, I'm done. It's like PM got it. And I can like step away. I think it's really important to understand what does that path look like for yourself. Like by one, really understanding what the skill sets of your team are so that you can have a baseline foundation. So then two, you can do a gap analysis. Like where are like the downsides of the individual team members and where might be the gaps as a whole, as a team, and where you could then lean in and help. I think it's really important. And then I think the third thing being a people manager is really around the people relationships, making sure that you have empathy, that you're able to learn by influence, and then practicing your operating range. I see a lot of people being able to go into details, but not being able to be strategic. As you grow in your people management leadership skills, not only are you required to talk to multiple cross-functional stakeholders, but you have to be able to translate and talk to people, maybe even the board, who doesn't understand the day-to-day. Like a really good example is that one company I'm working with now, the head of product is like preparing for a board meeting. And as we're going through the slides internally before the board meeting, there are so many acronyms, project names, like technical, like API descriptions. Like, no, like this, you have to really understand like your audience and be able to translate what your team is doing to different people. And that's really, really important as you grow as a people manager in a product function and organization. And most importantly, how are you able to communicate what your team is doing and translating them into metrics that
Mhm.
impact the company, that impact, business results?
Mhm.
I see a lot of gap there oftentimes. Like when we do roadmap planning, oftentimes you're able to say, all right, here's my hypothesis. Here are the use cases. Here's some goals. But it's very few times where I'm able to see product leaders tying quantitative metrics to the goals
Mhm.
that are solid. And then more importantly, how do those goals transfer into like business outcomes, business metrics? That there's like a huge gap oftentimes. And I do think that that's required of you as you grow in your product management skill set and as a leader.
Mm. Great. I'm seeing some of the questions here in the chat room. So yes, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them here, and then we will definitely try to cover all of them. I see Ye Hong here as a question. Hi, Ye Hong, are you here? Do you like to unmute yourself and ask your question regarding in the startup and then successful exit?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently founding my own startup, and I come from a background as a PM at a bigger tech company. And so what's really interesting to me, and what I would love to hear more about, is how you navigated the transition from, working in big tech, then going back to a startup, and then leading that startup into a successful exit.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that having worked in a big company allowed me to really understand the PM 101 skills that's required. That's very foundational. Really being able to have that solid foundation allow me to be a little bit more agile when I went to a startup on which areas of ownership I want to pick up. How would I go into like being able to pitch an idea and taking that project from ideation to execution with lean resources. I do think that the most challenging times were, one, how am I able to accomplish so much with so little resources? And two, how am I able to measure the impact of my work without a lot of supporting teams and functions and processes in place? And three, how could I best efficiently use my time given there's so much to do? I think those are the top three questions for me. And for each of those questions, I tackled the problem a little differently. For the first one about resources, I just really honestly asked myself on where I could step out of my comfort zone in a startup environment. So at that time, I remember, because I had an engineering background, there was like some things I could do still from an engineering perspective. And also there was no dashboard or analytics help available. So I did my own SQL. And I actually even worked on a data warehousing side. And that, I think that really stretched me, outside of my day-to-day PM responsibilities, but those were the areas that I felt comfortable being stretched into. And so I'd rather have like support from resources on the other sides that I couldn't lean into as much. And so being really honest with myself on like, okay, in a startup environment, it requires you to do a lot more different things. Like, where are those things that I could do? And I just like was not afraid to go into it. And then I would say like on the second and third, I combined thinking about it in terms of like just efficiency of my time, like just really, really prioritizing my time. I think it's required in a startup environment because you could do so many things. And it's not as clean cut as in a large organization, what your responsibilities are, what your goals are, how you should spend your week. So being honest with yourself and like, how am I using my time? And is it the most efficient way? I think it's really, really important in a startup environment. And then the second part to that is being really proactive in communication where you need help. I think in a startup environment, like people are all like, let's roll our like sleeves up, like help one another. And I think in a larger company, I was more afraid to ask for help if I didn't know something, or I was like, just overextended. In a startup environment, I just learned to quickly be able to like ask questions if I didn't know something, or saying like, hey, I'm overextended right now in these areas. I need help. Like, who can help me? And not being afraid of being perceived as just being like unsuccessful or not being able to do my job. I think like that mindset was like really, really important quickly. And then, so that's initially when I joined startup. And then when the startup, Trulia grew so fast. I mean, we went through exponential growth, right? Like I mentioned, like 100 something people to like 1,300 people in I think 3 years. It just required me to like grow up really quickly. As like a people manager, as like someone who is able to motivate the team in like rapid changing environments where roadmaps were changing all the time, customer needs were demanding, internal tools and payment systems like, needed like work all the time. And like there was like so much struggle during that period too about like thinking, oh, how do I keep my team focused in areas of responsibilities? How do I like do trade-offs between like internal tools and customer demands, and then how do I think about hiring fast enough to then like meeting the needs of my team? And so I started to get creative about using consultants, using agencies wherever I could, just doing rapid growth time with an eye on culture and people. And really making sure that I can retain people during that time was really important. So hopefully this is like helpful in my answer to, your question. I think it's just being able to be agile, being always honest with like what you are capable of doing and what your bandwidth allows. And then being proactive in your communication with everybody else during like a startup, especially rapid growing time. I think it's important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay, Becky here has a question. So Becky recently exited Macy's after several years there. So hi, Becky. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question here?
Sure. Yeah. So, I've spent the past 9+ years at the same company, Macy's, in kind of retail and e-commerce. And I was at the Gap prior to that for many, many years now in sort of the same area. Prior to that, I was in consulting and had a lot of, more diversification in my experience at that time. But I'm interested in making a change. I still want to continue in product leadership roles, but I've been looking at, moving into a SaaS company or, healthcare or a completely different space. And I think right now is just a tough climate, especially, to be looking to pivot. So just wondering if you have any particular, advice, someone that's looking to, make a change in this kind of challenging time.
I mean, yes, I've done it many times. And even now, I'm like advising consulting companies in industries that I have no knowledge in, like blockchain or something like that. And I think it always goes back to transferable skill sets and speaking to them and being able to highlight them in your LinkedIn profile too. Ultimately, at the end of the day, hiring managers and leaders are always looking for people that can really make an impact as soon as she comes in, and being able to really like lead a team or do the job well. So I think it's important for you to express your interest and apply to jobs that are of interest to you in the sectors that you mentioned, and then just highlighting like the skill sets that you have. So from like, I mean, right now in healthcare, a lot of companies are hiring. I mean, especially in startups, and they're moving into like telemedicine or like really ensuring that they understand like your insurance information up front, for instance, before showing you like doctors you can speak to. And I think if you are able to speak to your experience in e-commerce on the funnel side, right? Because it still becomes like, all right, people come in to like the shopping experience, or people come in to look for healthcare experience, and then it goes to like conversion and retention. It's still very similar in terms of like funnel purposes. And so I think you should just speak to your interest and then your experience, and making sure that the story is as transferable as possible. I think it's important, and I wouldn't hold back on showing interest in companies that you are interested in, because I think like e-commerce experience is very, very translatable.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I know, for myself, when I had open roles, and being a hiring manager, we certainly valued sort of the overall like competency in product management as more important than familiarity in the exact space that we were in. But but I think it's just right now, I think there's so many folks on the market, that it's a hires market, right now, and there's lots of people that have deep experience, in the same space. But I think that's great advice to focus on, what's really transferable, and to go for things that, you're just genuinely excited about and can express that. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I do hear you though. There are a lot of people on the job market. That is true. But I also do think like ultimately when I'm speaking with a lot of companies that are still hiring, they just want to hire good people. And industry knowledge is not as important, especially, I mean, healthcare, it is a highly regulated industry, but they would not expect like product managers and product leaders to have that like right out of gate. Like typically companies in healthcare tech, they have advisors or board members that like really understand the regulations. It's more like you showing like empathy on the users. Potentially, if you have actually even used a product, I think that goes a really long way, and show like the knowledge of how you would change the product and make it even better. I think that is typically like the way to really break into also industries that you might not be familiar with. And I'm happy to help. So please feel free to like ping me offline.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I just got this question sent to me privately. How to get a job at a big tech company from a really small startup, less than 50 people with about 2 to 3 years of experience. So how to pivot from startup to a bigger tech company?
I mean, a lot of people are able to make that jump. I think it's just showing how much you've been able to do at your startups, going back to like accomplishments with tangible goals and results, and then finding like the right job for you that matches a big company. Like I had a designer that I was working with me in a Series B startup recently, and she landed like a designer job at Facebook. And it's really going back to like the skill sets that you have, and then finding like the right job that you love. I mean, oftentimes big companies are not looking for you to have all the like experience that you might have had at like a big company already. They're just more seeing like your willingness to learn, your potential, as well as your past experience. So being able to package all of that up is going to be really important.
Great. And then I would also just add that just keep networking, network with people who is already working at, your dream company, and just to learn, what's their day-to-day look like, what are the skill sets required in their day job, and then, change your resume based on the conversations.
Yeah, and I do think that like in our Women in Product Facebook group, there are a lot of people sharing the experience about interviewing as well. So I think that it could be a good resource, and seeing like what the interview process looks like at these bigger companies. A lot of times people are just openly sharing them, like, and so I think you could be even more prepared for your interview process that way if you already know what the interview process looks like.
Mm-hmm. All right. I saw quite.
Recommendation was great.
Mm-hmm.
Big companies envy the nimbleness of small companies. It's an asset. Play it up. It's true.
So actually, Kristen has a question here. Would you like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself? Ask your question here. Oh, please unmute yourself.
I think she did.
Okay.
Okay, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yay,
Sorry,
I can hear
too many
you.
devices going on. Yeah, so hello, by the way. This is the first Woman in Product thing that I've been able to attend. Everyone else got canceled after I joined. So hello, nice to meet you ladies. My question is just about making the leap to C-level. I've had several executive level positions, been VP of product and digital at really big companies, Marvel as part of the Walt Disney Company. I'm getting ready to move over to Amazon. And somehow there seems like there's this glass ceiling at the C level. And I'm just curious, how do you even get in contention for a role like that and let it be known that that's really what you're aiming for? I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I was actually just talking to a friend about this precise topic earlier today. I think CPO is a relatively new term compared to CMO, CFOs, even CTOs. But it is starting to really get there. There are a lot more companies opening up the chief product officer title. But I still think it's relatively new compared to the other ones. And so I think my best advice to you is making sure that when you're able to negotiate for that title as you're joining a company, I think in larger companies is much harder. Like Amazon's, for instance, I don't even know what C-levels are available there right now, but as startups, I think it's much easier to negotiate the title once you're further along in the interview process. I have done that myself, and I've seen many of my friends do it. And I do think we continue to need to raise that awareness together, believe it or not, as a community. So on the advisor side, and also as a board member, I have been doing that. I've been definitely letting CEOs know that, as you're hiring head of products, please make them chief product officers and give them a C-level title, just like you would with a CFO. Because I think it is important to have that C-level title if you really ultimately want to be on a board in the longer term. People are looking for that. Companies look for that. It's going to take a very long time to ever change that. So it's important to fight for that C-level title whenever you can. But it's going to take a group effort. And it's really ultimately up to the CEO and founder. And also as much as I can influence on the board and advisor side, if I'm not the CEO, I can't ultimately make that happen. So I think if we could all do it as we're interviewing for jobs, as we get more senior, and those that we already are there, being able to fight for that internally and externally. And then I will continue to do that as much as possible on the board and on the advisor side. I think the other thing is that if you can get yourself to have board exposure, I think that will also increase your chances of having a C-level title. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the head of product or head of marketing or CFO, a lot of the C-suite, title comes into play. It's really the board meetings and being able to present and having the visibility and exposure there drive strategic discussions and decisions together. I think it's more important there. And then if you get visibility and if you're able to attend board meetings, I think it's also easier way to leverage and negotiate for that C-level title internally afterwards. And I've seen a number of success stories there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen, for asking your question. Hi, Safi. Safi has a question too. She is a PM at Microsoft now. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question here?
Sure. Thanks, Lingling. So I have three questions. Hi everyone, I'm Safi. The first thing I'd love to actually ask is how do you decide which startups to move to Yardley? I've seen, like, from your background, like all these amazing startups that you've been part of, they've been so incredibly successful. And as someone who loves startup but is also very worried about the uncertainty with startups, how do I come about assessing like whether or not a startup could be a good place to go for myself? So that's the first question. And then the second one is, what are, in your view and based on your experience, what are the most important skill sets for a PM to have? And then the third one is, I'm currently a PM2 at Microsoft. I really want to move into a more senior position, but I'm not really sure how I can position myself or what types of things I should be focusing on elevating in terms of skill sets to demonstrate that I'm ready for increased responsibilities and that I won't fail the team.
No, these are great questions. I'm really glad you asked them. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's go with the first one, picking the right startup. Man, that's like the magical question, I think, a lot of times, because everyone wants to join a startup that's going to be successful ultimately. And for me personally, I mean, even with my husband, he, just so I can add on to this conversation about his background, he joined a startup called Guidewire that made software for insurance companies, and it went public the same week that Trulia went public, and we were engaged like a week after. So it was like a very high for us. He spent 6 years at Guidewire. And then his next startup was Databricks, which he joined at Series A and now is a Series E company, and it's doing really, really well. And he's been there for almost 5 years. And so we've both have a love of like joining startups and have had the success. I mean, not like saying like, oh, we joined, like, gosh, I was going to say Airbnb, but I know they were just impacted. It's not like we've joined like, like Uber, that like, it's like this like splashing news, and like our companies are like all over the news about how wildly successful they are. But we've joined a number of startups that like had great exits. And I think picking the startups, we look at it this way. And I say we because we've done it together over the last 10 years. I think one is making sure you really believe in the company's mission and the problem that it's solving, because it's a grind. Like it ultimately, it's, joining a startup, especially early stage, is like a grind. You're putting a lot of hours, you're doing things you never thought you had to do. And it requires a lot out of you, like personally, to make it really work, and making it convincing when you're hiring for people to join you. And then second, look at the space, like from a competitive landscape perspective, from a TAM perspective. Like if you were an investor in a company, would you invest in it? Like, do you feel like you would really throw money at this company, the founders? Is the TAM going to be big? Like, it's like, is a competitive landscape crowded, and does this company have a chance to stand out? I think it's really important to look at it that way as well. And then I think the third thing is really the founders, and if I believe in them. And a lot of times it's like the founder, it's not about having like a founder that's had like successful exits per se, but it's having meetings with the founder. And I understand that maybe not every founder is able to meet with the candidates, but as much as possible, I would push for it, even if it's like a 10-minute conversation before you commit to joining. Because at the end of the day, like the founder is like who is going to lead the company through change, and a lot of change, whether it's like culturally, like business models, like taking money from like investors and whatnot. So I really think it's important to have those couple of minutes before joining a startup, and really understanding if this is like somebody that you are going to follow, and that this is somebody who is going to be able to lead the company through a lot of change. And that's how we look at our startups, like high level. These are the 3 criterias. And, I think that this has served us pretty well, being able to look at it in these dimensions. Because I think oftentimes people look at like joining startups, just look at the first thing. It's like, do I believe in the mission? Do I believe in a team? Cool. Seems like a great idea. Like, let's like go in. But you have to really look at like the market and dynamics. It's like, this is like really like a sure, like not a sure bet, but like a bet that you would feel like it's really going to make it based upon market dynamics, or at least make it to a certain point. And then like, like as long as you want to stay with the company to that point. Because like oftentimes like startups could have like the best team and have the best people and have the best mission, but if the market dynamics is not gonna like allow it to win or even have like early successes, you're just gonna like be pushing up like this big rock up the hill. Like if you can't figure out like go to market strategies, like even how to get adoption, how to get sales, like that's all those things you need to have it in your favor to have the slightest chance of like survival. And then it's like the founder. It's all about the founder early on. So I think it's really important to get those dynamics right before choosing a startup job. And I would just suggest being patient, because I think like it's exciting to join startups early that have like a great idea. And then you just like want to make the jump because it seems like it's a great deal. But I would just be patient to find ones that like meet all these 3 criterias as much as possible before jumping in. And of course, like those things go out the window if your friends are the ones that started a company. Oftentimes your friends are recruiting you, so then it's like, okay, I want to work with him, or I want to work with her. And then your second question was that about promotion, or was that about what I look for in PMs?
What are the most important skill sets for a PM? So my background is in marketing, go-to-market strategy, digital analytics. And so when I went into product management, I noticed that I wasn't really, at least initially, I had to work really, really hard to prove to like the engineers that I deserve to be a product manager, and that I can understand when they're talking about how they want to implement a potential solution, or how they want to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm wondering, like, are there things that I can do so that when I'm joining a team or taking over on a project, I don't have to start from scratch in proving my worth, and that I should have a seat at the table.
Well, you should have a seat at the table always. That's the mentality.
Yes.
I would say, so I look for these certain skill sets in PM. I think one is having really strong customer user empathy. You really need to have that to really be a successful PM, because you have to be relatable to the problems of the users that you're really like trying to solve the problems for. And then the second thing is all about analytics. To me, at the end of the day, what that means is understanding the right problems to solve, and then measuring against like the right solutions and hypotheses that you have. Measurement and being able to iterate and learn is everything. So to me, that like is all under the category of analytics. The third thing is like cross-functional leadership, or just leadership in general. Even if you're not a lead, you need to have that leadership skills, like the skill set, the presence, the drive to really want to lead the team to success. Sometimes it's just attitude, it's like, how often have I joined a team that's like, oh, okay, we're like been shipping this thing. It's like, okay. But then like the sales team, they say they can't sell it. We feel deflated because we're never able to like celebrate successes of our products that we're shipping. Like, that kind of situation. But, and then you just come in with like a positive mindset. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, guys, girls, team, we can do this. Let's
Yeah.
like pivot. Let's like change. Like, let's do a quick retro. Like, let me go talk to salespeople and understand like what is happening. Why can't we sell? Let me go talk to customers. It's kind of that. It's not like, hey, let me come and be a leader and like check off some boxes. It's like just motivating and like rallying a team and getting them excited. I think it's really, really important because they're like looking to you to like drive them forward. And then I think the fourth part is all about communication, whether it's like written, verbal, knowing your audience, who you're talking to, and then having the right communication method, cadence, proactiveness is important. So in situations like, for instance, it could be as small as like, all right, the engineering team is like feeling like frustrated that they have to meet these tight timelines. The requirements were forever shifting, so they can't hit like XYZ date that they promised. Now they feel like they're under the gun because like the CEO is like viewing like the engineering team can't ship on time. And it's like in that scenario, if you can come up with like the right communication to the CEO and C-level team or your manager and say like, hey, this is like a team effort. Like, yes, the engineering team and we cannot ship the product on time, but this was like, partially it was because like the requirements weren't ready yet because we still need to do some user research. And this is like how the timeline was pushed out. We understand the urgency. We're like going to get back on top of it. Our team is working really hard, and being able to like stand up for the team in that way, I think goes a long way. And so this is like the communication bucket. And I would say like the last bucket that I really look for is some of that grit that I talk about. As a product manager, like when things go well, great. But and when things go not well, not good, and like, it's like making sure that you have the grit to like get back on it, get the team motivated, rallied, not feel defeated, and being able to like rally the project back on track, I think is really, really important. And so a lot of things that I highlighted, as you can see, are much more like non-traditional, like technical engineering skill set. In fact, I don't even screen people for that. And I don't even think that's required to be a successful PM. I think it's all about like, if you're transitioning from product marketing and you want to build great credibility with engineers, great. Like, I think it's just asking them the questions, learning what you don't know. But at the end of the day, they're not expecting you to like know all like the code and like the technical details. It's like more important for you to round out your skill set in these other things where they feel like you could be a strong partner to them. And then the third thing about career progression, look, I mean, the mindset is that you have a seat at the table. For you to have promotion is as important for your manager to be vested in the process and journey and helping you get there. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, have that conversation with your manager, understand what is required for you to get promoted, and having regular check-ins to get that point. I think it's important because it's not just on you to develop it. It's also on him or her to help you come up with like a roadmap and a plan to get there and feel vested to get you to that place.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Safi. So we only have 4 minutes left, and then there's still a few questions here. So we will make sure we will cover them. But I do want to ask you, Yardley, since Mother's Day is coming up, and then you are a mom of 2 very cute little boys. But you're a mom, you are, this community founder, you're an angel investor, you're a startup advisor, just so many identities. How were you able to really grow yourself even after being a mom with like a lot of family responsibilities?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Because I have been asking myself a lot like actually about how do I continue to learn and how do I continue to grow on my own. Because like I'm an independent person, I'm a free agent right now. And so it's like really up to me to keep challenging myself. I don't have a manager like to help me like grow my career. So I think for me, it goes back to the same candy analogy that I shared, believe it or not. I still want to know like what are things I want to learn. And for me personally, I am no longer at a point where I want to learn more about product management specifically. I actually want to I want to learn more about how to run a company as a CEO, and you know, as like a board member, as me as a founder of a probably like a company that's not a traditional tech company. Like those are ideas that I have in mind. And so for me, as I look to continue to grow and think about all these different things that I am doing, it is about like the skill sets that I want to learn. And more recently, as examples, is that I've actually been proactively reaching out to people I don't know in non-tech industries who run successful companies. People that have been CEOs of like Fortune 500 companies, maybe Fortune 100 companies, in manufacturing, like in like spaces that are non-tech, because I ultimately want to learn how to run a business. And, you know, I think dividing a portion of my time to my own career growth is important. And you all need to be doing that. So as busy as we are in everything that we're doing every day, you need to spend X percentage of time thinking about, all right, if I want to get to this point and if I want to learn these things, who are the people I want to reach out to learn from, and make a plan there. And so to me, I am very, very conscious about how I divide my time on a weekly basis. I do keep a spreadsheet of how I spend my time still. And I've been doing this for about 5 years now. So this was like before my first son was even born. I think it's important to like see how I have spent my week. So there's a portion of it around like angel investing. There's definitely a portion that I've committed to like advising, board, you know, consulting work. There is obviously a portion of my free time, which is like my weekends. And I do look at how much time I'm like spending to myself. And if it's like rough estimates, it's fine. But I do need to be conscious of how I'm spending my time so that I can plan my next week and plan that time. Time is the only currency that we have that we cannot invent more of. It is really the only like precious resource that we just can't like make more of and invent more. So for me, like how I'm spending my time is the most important thing. And I think, you know, as a mom, I definitely do have a really strong support network system, and not everyone's fortunate enough to have that. But I do have my mom who lives with us, and she, you know, does help with the kids and house chores. And I think like I'm very, very grateful for that. But, you know, like many of you, I'm still navigating like my career, and I have to keep myself honest on how to continue to grow. On the advising consulting side, look, I've advised a lot of companies, a lot of first-time founders, CEOs, and more recently, I realized that the way I can continue to grow here is if I'm able to advise and consult with companies that might be a lot more mature, and work with CEOs that have strengths in areas that I don't, so I can learn from them. Because ultimately at DA, when I'm advising consulting, I'm partnering with the CEO. So that's like my way of challenging myself a little bit. So in whatever your day-to-day is, I challenge you to think about like, what are skill sets you want to learn? What are things that are so boring that you're like, man, if I have to do this another day, I'm just gonna like want to shoot myself. So, and how to take that thing that you keep that drags you down, that like demotivates you and that bores you, into like an opportunity of like, well, then I want to learn these other things, and that's going to make me excited, and that's going to uplift me. And then plan a strategy and timeline to get more of those things, because we all need a little bit more like uplifting energy at the end of the day, and try to minimize the things that drain us. And so hopefully that resonates.
That really, really helps. For me, at least I'm a new mom, and I have so many follow-up questions I want to ask you, Yardley, but our time is up, so I will leave our questions for our future sessions.
Okay.
Time flies so fast.
Again in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, yes.
I think we just like open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, and then
I would love to just like dive in and like have the conversations, maybe hear more from other people as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, we'll do this again in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks, yes.
At 11 though, right? Right, Rachel?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day to everyone. We will send out a survey, and then also next week we have another virtual hangout with another founder and board member of Women in Product Community, Ashita. So she is so she's a product leader at Twitter, and then she's responsible for like integrity products, which is super, super interesting. So hopefully you can join us. Yeah, she's also a founder.
She's also a mom, and she's a co-founder of Women Product as well. She's great.
Yeah, so yeah, super excited for next week's session. Hopefully you can all join us, and if you have any feedback, feel free to send that to our way, or filling out the survey that we are going to send out very, very soon. But thank you so much for joining us today and spending the time with us.
Thanks, ladies. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.